The notification sound from Elara's iPad cut through the midnight silence like a blade through paper. I sat in my leather chair, surrounded by the musty smell of old books and the weight of sleepless nights, watching the blue glow illuminate our half-renovated brownstone's living room. My wife had been working late again, which had become her favorite excuse for the past 8 months. I'm Felix Roard, 38 years old, owner of a rare bookstore downtown, and apparently the most oblivious husband in Portland, Maine. At least, that's what everyone would think if they saw me now, sitting alone at midnight, staring at financial notifications that didn't belong to me. The iPad lay forgotten on the coffee table, unlocked and vulnerable. Elara had stumbled in 20 minutes ago, reeking of expensive wine and someone else's cologne, muttering about closing the Peterson deal before collapsing into bed. The Peterson deal had supposedly ended 3 weeks ago. My fingers hovered over the device. 20 years of marriage should have built trust, but my background as a certified public accountant had taught me that numbers never lie. People do. The banking notification showed a transfer of $8,000 from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize. I opened my hidden drawer, the one Elara didn't know about, and pulled out my insurance folder. Inside were transaction logs, metadata reports, and mirrored emails dating back 6 months. Old habits from my auditing days had saved me before, and something told me they would again. The front door creaked. Elara's heels clicked against the hardwood floor in an unsteady rhythm. She appeared in the doorway, her usually perfect auburn hair disheveled, her designer blouse wrinkled and stained. "Felix?" Her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she was hiding something. "What are you doing up?" I closed the folder and slipped it back into the drawer. "Couldn't sleep. Just reading." I gestured to the antique copy of Hemingway beside me, though I hadn't turned a single page. She swayed slightly, gripping the door frame. "You should get some rest. Big day tomorrow." "Big day?" "Oh, you know, the usual." She waved dismissively and stumbled toward the stairs. "Corbin's coming by the office. We need to finalize some paperwork." Corbin Finler, her business partner, she claimed. Hedge fund manager with a penthouse overlooking Casco Bay and a smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. I'd met him twice at office parties, where he'd looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. Paperwork for what? But Elara was already climbing the stairs, muttering under her breath. I caught fragments. Tomorrow's the day, and cleaning up the mess, and something about being golden. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten it again, another sign of her increasingly scattered behavior. The screen lit up with a message from Corbin. "Tomorrow's the day. We're golden, babe." I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. Golden. They thought they were golden. I opened my laptop and accessed the read-only archive I'd been maintaining for months. Every transaction, every email, every digital footprint from our joint accounts flowed into this hidden repository. What I saw made my stomach clench. Systematic transfers, small amounts at first, then larger sums. Money flowing from our accounts to a series of shell companies, then consolidating into 2 primary destinations, accounts belonging to Elara Roard and Corbin Finler. They weren't just having an affair, they were robbing me blind. I scrolled through months of evidence, my hands trembling with rage and something else, anticipation. They thought they were so clever, so careful. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the quiet bookstore owner who used to hunt financial fraud for a living. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Romy Talbot, ex-cop turned private investigator. "Can't sleep either? Something's wrong. Call me." I smiled for the first time in months. If they wanted to play games, I'd give them the full treatment. No happy endings for cheaters and thieves. I was golden too, just not in the way they were hoping. 3 days later, I stood in my bookstore, surrounded by first editions and the comforting smell of aged paper, when the process server found me. He was a thin man with nervous eyes who kept glancing around like he expected the books to attack him. Felix roared, "That's me." He thrust a manila envelope into my hands. "You've been served." I opened it right there, between the mystery section and local history. Criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, 2 years of alleged financial crimes, with Elara listed as the primary victim and star witness. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Rourke's rare books had become my sanctuary after leaving the corporate world 5 years ago. The narrow shop occupied the ground floor of a Victorian building downtown, with tall windows that let in the gray main light and shelves that reached toward pressed tin ceilings. It was quiet, peaceful, and apparently the perfect place to be accused of crimes I didn't commit. My phone rang. Elara. "Felix, honey, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Her voice carried that practiced tone she used with difficult clients. "I tried to handle this privately, but my lawyer insisted." "Your lawyer?" "Martin Cross. He specializes in financial crimes. He says what you've been doing is serious, Felix. Very serious." I sat down behind my counter, surrounded by books that had survived decades or centuries, and marveled at my wife's performance. "What exactly have I been doing, Elara?" "Don't play dumb. The transfers, the shell companies, the fake business accounts. Martin has everything documented. 2 years of systematic theft from our joint assets." "I see." I opened my laptop and pulled up my archive. "And you had no knowledge of these transactions?" "Of course not. You handled all the finances. You told me not to worry about the details, remember? You said you'd take care of everything." That much was true. 6 months ago, I'd given her full control of our household finances and stepped back on paper. What she didn't know was that I'd kept access to everything. Read-only logs, metadata, transaction mirrors routed to an external archive. I'd wanted to see who was moving our money, and now I knew. "We need to meet," she continued. "Martin wants to discuss a plea arrangement. If you cooperate fully and return the missing funds, we might be able to avoid prison time." "How generous." "Felix, I'm trying to help you here. This is bigger than just us. The authorities are involved now. There's going to be a hearing." After she hung up, I called Romy. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you've got good news," she said. "Define good. My wife just had me charged with embezzling our own money." "Jesus. How much are we talking about?" I scrolled through the archive. "Looks like about 200,000 over the past 18 months. All of it transferred to accounts controlled by Elara and her boyfriend." Boyfriend. Corbin Finler, hedge fund guy. Thinks he's Gordon Gekko with better hair. Romy was quiet for a moment. "Felix, this sounds like a setup. They're trying to flip the script, make you the criminal before anyone discovers what they've been doing." "That's exactly what they're doing. The question is, what do we do about it?" "We? I like the sound of that. What do you need?" I looked around my bookstore, at the carefully organized chaos of literature and history, and felt something cold and deliberate settle in my chest. "I need you to help me set my contingency plan in motion." "Your what?" "Every transaction, every email, every digital breadcrumb from the past 2 years. It's all archived and mirrored to a secure cloud. If they want to play this game, we're going to play it with a full deck." "And if they try to destroy evidence?" "Too late. I've got copies of everything, and so does Nathan Mallor." "Who's Nathan Mallor?" "Elara's sister's husband, tech specialist. Quiet guy, but he's been suspicious of Corbin for months. I gave him a backup drive last week, just in case." Romy laughed, and it sounded like music. "You magnificent paranoid genius. They have no idea what they're walking into." "Not yet, but they will." That evening, I received an anonymous message through my bookstore's contact form. No sender information, just a video file and a brief note. "Thought you should see this. A friend." The video was time-stamped 3 days ago. Security footage from inside my own house, showing Elara and Corbin in my bedroom, papers spread across the bed, planning my destruction in intimate detail. "The charges will stick," Corbin was saying, his voice clear through my wife's phone camera. "Martin says the evidence is overwhelming." "What if Felix fights back?" Elara asked. "He's not stupid." "He's a bookstore owner, babe. What's he going to do, throw first editions at us?" They both laughed. They actually laughed. I watched the video 3 times, memorizing every word, every gesture, every casual dismissal of the man they were destroying. Then I forwarded it to Romy with a simple message: game on. If they wanted war, I'd give them the full Stephen King treatment. No happy endings for the villains in this story. The next morning, I stood on the dock at Spring Point Marina, watching fishing boats bob in the choppy water while Romy outlined our plan. The salt air cut through the October chill, and seagulls wheeled overhead like they were waiting for something to happen. "Corbin's penthouse has a security system, but it's connected to the building's main network," Romy explained, checking her tablet. "Standard rich guy mistake. They want convenience over security. And you know this how? I dated the building's IT consultant last year. Nice guy, terrible relationship skills, excellent memory for access codes. My boat, a 30-foot cabin cruiser named Second Chapter, rocked gently against the dock. I'd bought it after opening the bookstore, thinking Elara and I would spend weekends exploring the coast. Instead, it had become my refuge, the place I came to think and plan. "What about the legal side?" I asked. "That's where your sister-in-law comes in. Kira's been asking questions about Corbin for weeks. She knows something's wrong, but she doesn't have proof." Yet, Romy grinned. "But she will after tonight." Corbin's building was one of those glass and steel monuments to excess that sprouted along Portland's waterfront like expensive weeds. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors, with panoramic views of Casco Bay and enough square footage to house a small village. We waited until midnight, when Corbin was safely at his favorite bar downtown, a detail confirmed by his social media posts. The man couldn't resist broadcasting his every move, another rich guy mistake that worked in our favor. Getting into the building was easier than expected. Romy's contact had provided temporary access codes, and the night security guard was more interested in his phone than the monitors. Corbin's penthouse was a monument to tasteless wealth: white leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my annual income, and a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Everything was cold, sterile, perfect, except for the home office. That's where we found the real treasure: a hidden safe behind a fake Picasso, containing documents that made my archive look like amateur hour. Bank statements, transfer authorizations, and a leather-bound ledger that detailed the entire scheme. "Look at this," Romy whispered, photographing pages with her phone. "They've been planning this for over a year. There are notes about your daily routine, your business finances, even your relationship with Kira." I found Corbin's burner phone in a desk drawer, along with a draft agreement titled Asset Division Post Felix. They'd already decided how to split my life's work between them. "We need to send a message," I said, pocketing the phone. "Something that lets them know the game has changed." Romy raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" I walked to Corbin's bedroom closet, where a collection of designer shoes was arranged like a shrine to vanity. I selected his most expensive pair, Italian leather loafers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Help me with something from the marina." 20 minutes later, we'd filled those pristine loafers with fish guts from the marina's bait shop. The smell was overwhelming, and it would take weeks to get out of the leather, if it ever did. "Petty revenge?" Romy asked. "Psychological warfare. He'll know someone was here, but he can't prove anything. It'll eat at him." We planted a tracking device under his coffee table and installed a small camera near his computer. Nothing illegal. The devices were commercially available and didn't record audio. but they would let us monitor his movements and see who visited. Before leaving, I left a note on his pillow. Plot twist coming soon. FR. The next morning, I leaked select information to Corbin's business rivals and a financial reporter who specialized in hedge fund scandals. Nothing that would compromise our case, just enough to make his professional life uncomfortable. By noon, Corbin's fund was fielding questions about irregular trading patterns and client account discrepancies. His business empire, built on reputation and confidence, began to wobble. Elara called me 3 times that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Felix, we need to talk. Something's happening with Corbin's business, and people are asking questions about our case. Call me back. Instead, I called the bank and froze our joint accounts, citing suspected fraudulent activity. It was a temporary measure, but it would prevent any more unauthorized transfers. At 5 o'clock, Elara stormed into my bookstore like a hurricane in a business suit. Her usual composure was cracking, and I could see panic in her eyes. "What did you do?" she demanded. I looked up from my copy of Raymond Chandler, noting how appropriate it was to be reading The Big Sleep at this particular moment. "I'm not sure what you mean. The accounts are frozen. Corbin's under investigation. Someone broke into his apartment." "That sounds serious. Maybe you should call the police." "Don't play games with me, Felix. I know you're behind this." I closed the book and gave her my full attention. "Elara, according to the charges you filed, I'm a criminal mastermind who's been stealing from our accounts for 2 years. If that's true, then yes, I probably have the skills to cause problems for people who cross me. If it's not true, then you're accusing an innocent man of crimes he didn't commit." She stared at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married 20 years ago, before the ambition and greed transformed her into someone I didn't recognize. "The hearing is in 3 days," she said finally. "Martin thinks the judge will rule in our favor." "I'm sure he does." After she left, I opened my laptop and checked the tracking data. Corbin had spent the afternoon at his lawyer's office, then at a bar, then at another lawyer's office. The panic was spreading. My phone buzzed. A text from Kira. "Can we meet? I have something you need to see." I smiled and typed back, "Tomorrow morning, my store, come alone." The pieces were falling into place, and soon Elara and Corbin would discover that the quiet bookstore owner had a few plot twists of his own. Kira Mallor arrived at my bookstore the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the expression of someone who'd spent the night making difficult decisions. At 30, she was 5 years younger than Elara, but infinitely wiser, with the kind of practical intelligence that cut through nonsense like a sharp knife. "I brought caffeine," she said, handing me a cup. "We're going to need it." I locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Whatever Kira had to share required privacy. "Nathan knows," she said without preamble, "about Elara and Corbin, about the money, about what they're trying to do to you." Nathan Mallor was Kira's husband, a soft-spoken tech specialist who worked for the city's IT department. He was the kind of person who noticed everything but said nothing, until he did. How long has he known? Months. He's been tracking their communications through Elara's cloud backup. She gave him her password last Christmas when she needed help with her phone, and she never changed it. Kira sat down across from my desk, surrounded by towering shelves of books. "Nathan's been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act. When Elara filed charges against you, he knew it was time." She pulled out her husband's phone and set it on the desk between us. "Everything's here, Felix. Text messages, emails, voice recordings, financial documents, 2 years of evidence that proves Elara and Corbin orchestrated this entire scheme. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I picked up the phone and scrolled through months of communications. The evidence was devastating and comprehensive. Messages between Elara and Corbin discussing how to handle the Felix problem. Voice notes planning my arrest so they could access our accounts without interference. Draft agreements dividing my assets between them. "There's more," Kira said. "Nathan found evidence that Martin Cross, Elara's lawyer, has been feeding information to Corbin's legal team. They're coordinating their strategy. That's a conflict of interest. It's also illegal. Nathan documented all the communications between Cross and Corbin's attorneys." I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the conspiracy against me. "Why are you doing this, Kira? Elara's your sister." "Elara stopped being my sister the day she decided to destroy an innocent man for money." Her voice was steady, but I could see the pain in her eyes. "You've been family to me for 20 years, Felix. Real family. You were there when Nathan and I got married, when we bought our house, when my father was in the hospital. Elara was always too busy climbing the corporate ladder." She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the street. "Nathan and I talked about this all night. We know what it means to go against Elara. She'll never forgive us. I can't ask you to sacrifice your relationship with your sister. You're not asking. I'm choosing." She turned back to me. "The hearing is tomorrow morning. Nathan will be there." "What's the plan?" "We wait for Elara and Corbin to commit perjury. Then Nathan stands up and hands the judge his phone. Everything's already loaded and ready to play." That evening, I met Romy at a seafood restaurant near the marina. The place was nearly empty, which suited our purposes perfectly. "Kira and Nathan are in," I told her. "They'll be at the hearing tomorrow." "Good, because Corbin's getting desperate." She showed me photos from the surveillance camera we'd planted. He's had 3 different lawyers at his apartment today, plus 2 guys who looked like private investigators. "Searching for evidence?" "Or planning to plant some. Either way, he's panicking." I cut into my lobster roll, thinking about tomorrow's hearing. What if this doesn't work? What if the judge doesn't believe the evidence? Then we go to plan B. Which is? We don't have a plan B. This has to work. That night, I sat in my bookstore after closing, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Books about justice and revenge, love and betrayal, the triumph of good over evil. But real life was messier than literature, and tomorrow would determine whether the good guys actually won. My phone rang. Elara. "Felix, I want you to know that I take no pleasure in this." "Really?" "We could have handled this privately, but you forced our hand. The evidence against you is overwhelming." "What evidence would that be?" "Don't insult my intelligence. Martin has bank records, transfer authorizations, communications proving you orchestrated this scheme. You're going to prison, Felix. The only question is for how long." "I see. And after I'm convicted, what happens to our assets?" "They'll be returned to their rightful owner. Me." "Of course. And Corbin. What's his role in all this?" "Corbin's been trying to help me uncover your crimes. He's been a good friend during this difficult time." I almost laughed. Even now, she couldn't admit the truth. "Elara, do you remember our wedding day? You promised to love and honor me, for better or worse. That was before I knew who you really were." "Yes," I said. "It was." After she hung up, I walked through my store one more time, touching the spines of books that had become old friends. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either I'd be vindicated or I'd lose everything I'd worked for. But I wasn't the same naive husband who'd discovered that first banking notification. I was someone else now. Someone harder, smarter, more dangerous. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become one yourself. Tomorrow, Elara and Corbin would discover that the quiet bookstore owner had been writing his own ending all along. The Cumberland County Courthouse was a granite monument to justice, its neoclassical columns and imposing facade designed to intimidate anyone who approached its steps. I arrived early, wearing my best suit, and carrying a briefcase full of documents I hoped I wouldn't need. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock in Judge Patricia Maris's courtroom. Maris was known for her sharp intellect and low tolerance for nonsense, qualities that would serve me well if everything went according to plan. Elara arrived with Martin Cross, her lawyer, and an entourage of witnesses that included Corbin and several colleagues from her firm. She looked confident, composed, every inch the successful attorney who'd been wronged by her criminal husband. Cross was exactly what I'd expected: expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of practiced charm that made juries trust him. He nodded politely when he saw me, probably already planning his victory speech. Corbin sat in the gallery behind Elara, playing the role of supportive friend. He'd chosen a conservative navy suit and subdued tie, clearly coached on how to appear respectable. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the courtroom. Kira and Nathan entered quietly and took seats near the back. Nathan clutched his phone like a lifeline, his face pale but determined. Kira caught my eye and nodded once. They were ready. Judge Maris called the hearing to order at exactly 9 o'clock. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of State versus Felix Roard. Mr. Cross, you may present your opening statement. Cross stood and launched into his narrative. I was a financial predator who'd exploited my wife's trust, systematically looting our joint accounts through a complex scheme of shell companies and fraudulent transfers. Elara was the innocent victim, a hard-working attorney who'd discovered her husband's crimes and courageously reported them to authorities. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mr. Roard orchestrated a sophisticated embezzlement scheme spanning 2 years, Cross declared. He exploited his background in accounting to create false documentation and hide his tracks. When Mrs. Roard discovered the truth, he attempted to intimidate her into silence. It was a compelling story, professionally delivered. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. The prosecutor, a young woman named Jennifer Hayes, presented the state's evidence: bank records showing suspicious transfers, documentation of shell companies traced back to me, witness statements from Elara and Corbin describing my suspicious behavior. Mr. Roard had exclusive control of the family finances, Hayes explained. Mrs. Roard trusted her husband completely, signing documents she believed were routine financial paperwork. Only when she began receiving calls from creditors did she realize the extent of his deception. Then it was Elara's turn to testify. She took the witness stand with practiced grace, her voice steady as she described our marriage and my supposed crimes. According to her testimony, I'd become secretive and controlling over the past 2 years, insisting on handling all financial matters while keeping her in the dark about our true financial situation. I trusted Felix completely, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He told me the transfers were for legitimate business purposes, that he was diversifying our investments. I never questioned him because I loved him. Cross guided her through months of alleged deception, painting me as a master manipulator who'd exploited her love and trust. It was a masterful performance, complete with tears at all the right moments. Mrs. Roard, when did you first realize something was wrong? Cross asked. When our mortgage payment was rejected. I called the bank and discovered our accounts had been nearly emptied. When I confronted Felix, he became angry and defensive. That's when I knew I had to investigate. And what did your investigation reveal? That my husband had been systematically stealing from our joint accounts for 2 years. Money that should have secured our future was gone, transferred to accounts I'd never seen before. The cross-examination by my court-appointed attorney was brief and ineffective. He was clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of the case and the quality of Cross's preparation. Then Corbin took the stand. He played his role perfectly, the concerned friend who'd tried to help Elara understand her husband's crimes. According to his testimony, I'd approached him months ago with investment opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Felix was very persuasive, Corbin said. He showed me documents, projections, what appeared to be legitimate business plans. I advised Elara to be cautious, but Felix was her husband. She trusted him. Did you ever suspect Mr. Roard was defrauding his wife? Cross asked. Not at first, but as time went on, his explanations became more elaborate, more difficult to verify. When Elara came to me with her concerns, I encouraged her to investigate. And you assisted in that investigation? I helped her understand the financial documents, yes. My background in hedge fund management gave me the expertise to recognize the irregularities in Felix's paperwork. It was all lies, of course, but convincing lies delivered by a professional con man who'd spent years perfecting his pitch. Judge Maris listened to everything with the expression of someone who'd heard it all before. When Cross finished presenting his case, she turned to my attorney. Does the defense have any witnesses? My lawyer started to respond, but that's when Kira stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, I have evidence relevant to this case. Judge Maris frowned. Ma'am, you haven't been sworn in as a witness. I'm Kira Mallor, Mrs. Roard's sister. My husband has been documenting communications related to this case for the past 6 months. Cross jumped to his feet. Objection. This is highly irregular. But Judge Maris was intrigued. Approach the bench, all counsel. After a brief conference, the judge ruled that Nathan could present his evidence. He walked to the front of the courtroom on unsteady legs, his phone clutched in his sweating hands. Mr. Mallor, you understand you're under oath? Judge Maris asked. Yes, Your Honor. Please explain the nature of your evidence. Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. I have text messages, emails, and voice recordings between my sister-in-law Elara Roard and Corbin Finlor. They show that Mr. Roard is innocent and that Mrs. Roard and Mr. Finlor conspired to frame him. The courtroom erupted. Cross was shouting objections, Elara was on her feet denying everything, and Corbin looked like he was about to run. Judge Maris banged her gavel. Order, Mr. Mallor, I'm going to need to examine that evidence. Nathan handed over his phone. Judge Maris spent several minutes scrolling through the contents, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Bailiff, please connect this device to the courtroom's display system. What followed was the complete destruction of Elara and Corbin's carefully constructed lies. Text messages between them discussing how to frame me. Voice recordings planning my arrest so they could access our accounts. Email chains coordinating their testimony with Martin Cross. The most damaging evidence was a draft agreement titled Asset Division Post-Felix, detailing exactly how they planned to split my life's work between them. Elara's voice filled the courtroom from a recording made just days earlier. Once Felix is convicted, we'll have access to everything. The bookstore, the house, the investment accounts. We just need to make sure our stories match. Corbin's response was equally damning. Martin says the case is airtight. Felix will get 2 to 5 years, and by the time he gets out, we'll be long gone. Judge Maris stopped the playback and fixed Elara with a stare that could have melted steel. Mrs. Roard, do you have any explanation for these communications? Elara's composure finally cracked. Your Honor, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Bailiff, please place Mrs. Roard and Mr. Finlor under arrest for perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. The charges against me were dropped on the spot. Elara and Corbin were led away in handcuffs while their lawyer requested an emergency delay that Judge Maris denied with obvious satisfaction. I sat in stunned silence as the courtroom emptied around me. 20 years of marriage destroyed in a single morning. But as I watched Elara being processed for booking, I felt no sadness, only a cold satisfaction that justice had finally been served. Kira approached as I gathered my papers. Are you okay? I'm free, I said. For the first time in months, I'm actually free. Nathan joined us, looking relieved but exhausted. What happens now? I looked toward the courthouse steps, where reporters were already gathering to cover the story of the lawyer who'd tried to frame her husband. Now they face the consequences of their choices. And you? I thought about my bookstore, my boat, the life I'd built that they'd tried to steal. Now I go home and figure out what comes next. But first, there was one more chapter to write in this story. Elara and Corbin had destroyed my marriage and tried to destroy my life. They deserved more than just criminal charges. They deserved to lose everything, just as they'd planned for me. The game wasn't over. It was just entering its final phase. 3 days after the hearing, I stood on the rooftop bar of the Portland Harbor Hotel, watching the city lights reflect off Casco Bay. The October wind carried the salt smell of the ocean and the promise of an early winter. I'd chosen this location carefully, public enough to be safe, private enough for honest conversation, and symbolic enough to make my point. Elara and Corbin had been released on bail pending their trial, their legal teams working overtime to minimize the damage from Nathan's evidence. But criminal charges were only the beginning of their problems. I'd spent the past 72 hours systematically dismantling their lives with the same methodical precision they'd used to plan mine. Financial reporters were now investigating Corbin's hedge fund, discovering a pattern of questionable trades and client account irregularities. The Maine Bar Association had opened an ethics investigation into Elara's conduct, and her law firm had placed her on administrative leave. But tonight was about more than professional consequences. Tonight was about justice. Romy arrived first, carrying a tablet full of information she'd gathered over the past week. "Everything's in place," she reported. "Corbin's penthouse is officially in foreclosure. His legal fees ate through his liquid assets faster than expected. Elara's facing a malpractice lawsuit from 3 former clients who claim she mishandled their cases while distracted by personal matters. And Martin Cross? Suspended pending investigation of his role in the conspiracy. Turns out Nathan's evidence showed he was actively coordinating perjured testimony, which is a career-ending mistake." I nodded, feeling the cold satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. "What about the media coverage?" "Front page of the Portland Press-Herald this morning. Prominent attorney charged with framing husband. The story's been picked up by legal journals and true crime blogs. Elara's become a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal." At 8 o'clock, Elara appeared at the rooftop entrance. She looked like she'd aged years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was unkempt, her designer clothes wrinkled, her confident demeanor replaced by desperate anxiety. "Felix." She approached our table hesitantly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Sit down, Elara." She took the chair across from me, her hands shaking slightly. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, and the sound carried across the empty rooftop. "Angry doesn't begin to cover what I feel about what you tried to do to me. I can explain everything. Corbin, he manipulated me, convinced me that you were stealing from us. I was trying to protect our assets." "Stop." I held up a hand. "We're past the point of lies, Elara. I have recordings of you planning my destruction. I have evidence of you coordinating perjured testimony. I know exactly who you are and what you did." Corbin appeared at the rooftop entrance, scanning the area nervously before approaching our table. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by the hunted look of a man who knew his world was collapsing. "Felix," he said, not sitting down. "We need to talk about a deal." "A deal?" "I can make this go away. The charges, the media attention, all of it. I have connections, resources." "You have nothing," Romy interrupted. "Your fund is under federal investigation. Your assets are frozen, and your reputation is destroyed. What exactly are you planning to offer?" Corbin's face flushed red. "You think you've won? You think destroying us makes you some kind of hero?" I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of months of planning and preparation. "I think justice has been served. You tried to send an innocent man to prison so you could steal his life's work. Now you're facing the consequences of that choice." "You self-righteous piece of—" Corbin lunged toward me, but Romy was faster. She stepped between us, her hand resting on something under her jacket. "I wouldn't," she said quietly. "There are security cameras everywhere, and you're already facing criminal charges. Assault won't improve your situation." Corbin backed away, his hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said. "It is." I pulled out my phone and opened a news app, showing them the breaking story that had just been published. Portland hedge fund manager under federal investigation for securities fraud. The article detailed irregularities in Corbin's fund dating back 3 years, information I'd provided to investigators after discovering it in his hidden safe. "How did you—" Corbin's voice cracked. "You left your safe open the night we visited your penthouse. Romy photographed everything while I was dealing with your shoes." Elara stared at the phone screen in horror. "You broke into his apartment?" "I retrieved evidence of crimes committed against me, evidence that's now in the hands of appropriate authorities." I showed them another article, this one from the Maine Bar Association's newsletter. "Attorney under investigation for ethics violations." It detailed Elara's role in the conspiracy, her coordination with Martin Cross, and the potential consequences for her legal career. "Your law license is suspended pending investigation," I continued. "Your firm has terminated your partnership. 3 former clients are suing for malpractice. Your professional reputation is finished." Elara was crying now, but I felt no sympathy. "Felix, please. We can work this out. I'll drop all charges. We can get divorced quietly, split our assets fairly." "Our assets?" I laughed again. "Elara, you don't have any assets. Your legal fees have consumed your savings, your income is gone, and your professional future is non-existent. You have nothing left to offer." I gestured toward the city spread out below us. 2 weeks ago, you owned a partnership in one of Portland's most prestigious law firms. You had a beautiful home, a successful career, a reputation built over 15 years of hard work. You threw it all away for what? A few $100,000 and a man who's probably planning to blame everything on you to save himself? Corbin and Elara looked at each other, and I saw the exact moment their alliance crumbled. The trust was gone, replaced by the knowledge that each would sacrifice the other to minimize their own punishment. "This is your fault," Elara hissed at Corbin. "You convinced me Felix was stealing from us. You said the plan was foolproof." "I never told you to file criminal charges," Corbin shot back. "That was your idea, your way of getting revenge because you thought he suspected us." I watched them turn on each other with the same cold satisfaction I'd felt in the courtroom. They'd destroyed their marriage, their careers, and their futures for money they'd never get to spend. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a final document. "I've purchased your penthouse, Corbin. The bank was eager to sell after your assets were frozen. I got it for about 60 cents on the dollar." Corbin's face went white. "You can't—" "I can. I did. You have 30 days to vacate." I stood up and walked to the rooftop's edge, looking out over the harbor where my boat was moored. Tomorrow, I would sail out into Casco Bay and think about what came next. The bookstore would reopen, life would continue, but it would be different now. "You wanted everything, Elara," I said without turning around. "Our money, our house, our future. You wanted to erase me completely and start over with your lover. Instead, you've lost everything that mattered, your career, your reputation, your freedom." I turned back to face them one last time. I was the underdog in this story, the quiet bookstore owner who wasn't supposed to fight back. But you made one crucial mistake. You underestimated the man you tried to destroy. Security guards appeared at the rooftop entrance, responding to a call I'd made an hour earlier. Elara and Corbin were violating the terms of their bail by meeting together, a condition their lawyers had apparently forgotten to mention. As they were led away for the second time in a week, I remained on the rooftop, watching the lights of the city reflect off the dark water. The story was over. the final chapter written exactly as I'd planned. I pulled out my phone and called Kira. "It's finished," I told her. "How do you feel?" I thought about that question as I walked toward the elevator. How did I feel? Not happy exactly. There was no joy in destroying the woman I'd once loved. But there was satisfaction in seeing justice served, in proving that sometimes the good guys do win. "I feel free," I said finally. "For the first time in months, I feel completely free." The elevator doors closed, and I descended back into my life, a life that was mine again, bought and paid for with careful planning and righteous anger. Outside, the October wind was picking up, promising storms ahead. But I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. I'd learned to navigate them.